I will start with myself quickly. My name is Vera. I am a researcher and product manager at WifOR Institute, especially focusing on the WifOR Impact Sustainability tool, WISIT. And I will now hand over to Dr. Richard Scholz, Head of Impact Analysis at WifOR Institute.
Hi together, my name is Richard. I'm heading the impact analysis team of WifOR. I'm an economist from my profession and working at WifOR since 8 years. We're working together with ministries, associations, and several multinational corporates to measure their impact of organizations or industries. And I'm very glad that Iris is here together with us. Very much welcome you and welcome to everybody on board. Handing over to Iris.
Thank you,
Hi,
Richard.
everyone, and thanks a lot, Vera and Richard, for the invite. It's great to be here. My name is Iris. I'm part of SAP's corporate sustainability team, and looking forward to our today's session.
Thank you so much, Iris, and thank you so much, Richard, for your quick introductions. So I'd like to outline the goal for today's masterclass before we get started. So today we really want to dive deep into how impact accounting can drive sustainability and long-term strategy for businesses by giving data-driven solutions to businesses and so that they can achieve these goals. We will also be presenting insights from our WifOR Impact Sustainability tool, WISIT, and we will really show how WISIT can empower companies and users into taking ownership of their data and into really driving this process of the supply chain impact measurement. So to finish on that, we will also be addressing your questions on impact accounting in regards to the methodologies and the models that we use, but also about the impact accounting tool WISIT and about its functionalities. Now I'd like to give you a short overview of the agenda for today. We will first be hearing from Richard about the case of impact accounting using WISIT, so also how WISIT can support impact accounting and how it works. Second, we will have some insights by Iris from SAP, and she will tell us a bit about how she has been using the WifOR Impact Sustainability tool in SAP's operations so far. And finally, we will have time for a Q&A session. And on this one, I'm really looking forward to all of your questions. I really encourage everyone to please write in the chat room any questions you should have and raise your hand should you want to speak. So let's get started, I would say. And with this, I'm handing over to our first speaker, Richard.
Thanks so much, Vera. So I'm very glad to present today here, or to start a little bit with the idea of what is impact accounting about. So what do we mean with measuring and monetizing impact on society and nature? And therefore I brought some slides and want to explain what we really mean about this. So when we as WifOR, but also our partners, like I see the WifOR has joined here as well, hi Andrea, but also the Value Balancing Alliance, talk about impact accounting, we mean a holistic picture of what is the impact of a corporate or an industry to society and nature. So that encompasses all sustainability dimensions, and I brought here those 3 pillar dimensions. Sometimes, as for example, the Capitalist Coalition is talking about 4 capitals. That's not so important. But important is that we are referring to the inside-out perspective. So we really want to capture all the dimensions of the impact that a corporate has to the society and the nature. So you might be very aware of the corporate carbon footprint, and that would be here in the green pillar. So in the environmental footprint, we really see these scope 1, 2, and 3 upstream and downstream emissions of a corporate. But that's the sustainability is not only about GHG emissions, as you all know. So that would also encompass the water footprint, the air emission footprint, land use, and waste. And in the social footprint, we would then look at occupational injuries, child labor, but also forced labor, for example, in the supply chain. And we also look at the economic footprint of a corporate, so mainly the GDP contribution of a corporate, and again, along the full supply chain, so own operations upstream and downstream. However, when you talk to stakeholders but also financial actors, and you tell them, hey, this corporate is emitting particulate matter worth of 2,500 kilograms, that says nothing to a usual stakeholder because nobody knows what does this mean to society. And that is why we have this gray thing in here that we call impact valuation. And let me briefly explain what I mean with impact valuation. So I explained usually corporates are reporting CO2 emissions or particulate matter. However, why do they report on that? Because CO2 emissions cause the climate change, and climate change causes extreme weather events and therefore causes human health issues and also agricultural losses. And those human health aspects and agricultural losses are researched quite well, and there's lots of research studies that show what is the societal damages due to the climate change. And when we look at those studies, there is studies that show that 1 ton of greenhouse gases has damages to society of about $226 per ton of GHG emissions. And that is the social cost of carbon. And those that $226 per tons of GHG emissions, that is something that we call a value factor, because that's showing the value of GHG emissions to society and nature. And that can be then, that allows us to express CO2 emissions, but also water, land use, but also child labor, occupational injuries, and other indicators in a common unit, namely a monetary unit, so US dollars or euros. And that allows us to compare those different impacts. And again, as I said, I'm very happy that Andrea is here because there's lots of partners that work together with us on those value factors. And we have just recently published our value factors 2.0, but we also have agreed on a partnership with the WifOR that we implement those value factors into our WISIT tool. And I will show you that in a few seconds. So those value factors allow us now to compare different impacts with each other in one common unit. And that is a result of a just recently published benchmark study that we show, which is available for 11 sectors on a global scale. And that is some typically what we call impact intensities. So for example, in the transportation sector, per €1 of revenues / output, which is the production value, there is in total 31 cents of environmental externalities, and therefore only 8 cents from the transportation sector directly, but 23 cents from the full supply chain of the transportation sector. And in addition to that, we have 8 cents of social externalities, including a positive externality cost training. And you see that using those value factors really allows us to express those different kinds of indicators in a very meaningful way, and then helps corporates to really prioritize issues and also make difficult decisions that encompasses trade-offs between those indicators. However, it is not, you will now ask us, that's quite complicated to apply, and especially where do we get all those numbers, especially for air emissions, land use, in the full supply chain from? And therefore, we developed WISIT, and WISIT can help you to measure especially the upstream impacts of corporates in a quite easy and comprehensive way. So you will get those results directly, and I will show you how this works. And you will now ask, of course, but yes, but which data points do I need to calculate those impacts? And we know this challenge quite well because we work with lots of corporates. So what we know is which data points are usually available at corporates, and what usually those corporates manage quite well is their expenses. So they usually have a quite good procurement system. And from that procurement system, we need mainly 3 informations. So we need to know which products and services are bought by the corporate. We need to know where are those products that the company is buying are produced. This is already sometimes a little bit difficult, but we might make assumptions because you at least have a supplier address. And we need to know how much of those products is bought. And we need to know this in a monetary unit. So we need to know the euros or US dollars that is spent to those corporates or to offer those products, and not the kilograms of steel or number of consultancy hours. So this data input is here represented as a list of order placements. And once we have those lists, we can plug them into our model. So by example, this corporate is buying chemicals worth of 3,000 euros from the French chemical industry. And in our model, from our model, we know how much CO2 emissions, how much child labor, how much water, and how much air emissions, and so forth and so on, are emitted per $1 of revenue in the French chemical industry. So I brought you this example. So if you know those, the G intensity, for example, but we have those intensities for all other indicators as well, we can simply multiply the intensity with the 3,000 US dollars that is bought to get the emissions directly purchased that are rising directly from the purchases in the French chemical industry. And once we know those emissions, we can multiply them with the value factor that I explained before. And if we multiply those 990 kilograms with a value factor of 226, we get to the monetized impact of 233 US dollars, which is the impact of the CO2 emissions that are directly emitted due to the purchases of the chemical products in the French chemical industry. And now you say, but that's easy, that's only tier 1 and that's only an industry average. But what's more important is how much products has the chemical industry outsourced and how much energy has them purchased and what are the products that they're buying from. And this is why in our model, we have a purchase list of the French chemical industry that allows us to trace what is the typical products that the French chemical industry is buying from other supplier country industry combinations. So we go through all the other country industry combinations where the chemical industry is purchasing from and do the same calculations for those country industry combinations, and can again also apply these respective value factor and in the single countries, as such that we can also calculate the impacts that are arising at tier 2, so the suppliers of the French chemical industry. And once we have done this, we look at the purchase lists of the suppliers of the French chemical industry and go through all the other suppliers lists. And we do this really not only until tier 3, but we really do this until tier infinity. So it's really a network of value creation, because some of the CO2 emissions arise again at the French chemical industry because they are purchasing different things from each other. So it's really a network. And this is not invented by us. This was a simple explanation of how input-output models are working. So input-output models are exactly doing that, what I just explained, but they do not do this via hand and having those lists, but they simply apply matrix algebra to do those calculations, and the calculations has been invented by Vasily Leontiev, and he also got a Nobel Prize from that. And this is a quite typically applied methodology, either for economic impact analysis, but it's also usually applied if you use a spend-based emission factor from, for example, Xio-base. Also, those kind of input-output tables are lying behind that. What we have done at WifOR is we have developed a quite comprehensive input-output model that encompasses 215 countries, 64 sectors, and has data points from 2010 until the year 2020. Meanwhile, we have forecasted it to the year 2050. And it encompasses 170 plus environmental, social, and economic indicators that are linked to value factors. So that is the special thing with the WifOR input-output model. And using WISIT, we can then look at where are those impacts occurring on whether they are occurring in tier 1, tier 2, in which countries, in which sectors those impacts are occurring. And the only thing that you need for that is a purchase list that need to be prepared in the right manner that you can then upload into the WISIT tool. And this is an exemplary purchase list. I will also show you an exemplary purchase list in a second in an Excel file. And you can then plug the spend file into our model and retrieve the results that I just explained. So giving you an example, this is an exemplary purchase list that we have provided for you that you can also download at WISIT. And you see here the manufacturing country as an ISO 3 code. We have developed the manufacturing sector. So this is, for example, the chemical sector, which is the C20. C21 is the pharmaceutical sector. And we have here the values in US dollars. And we also need the year to do the calculation. In addition, you might also have thousands and thousands of other information in your procurement list because you want to calculate, hey, which product has which impact, or which supplier potentially has which impact, or which function has which impact. So you might also include lots of other columns in here that you want to analyze later on. And once you have this purchase list, you can go into impact.wifor.com, and this is the starting page that you can get here. If you already have uploaded some purchase lists, you can go to existing project, but we want to now start a new project and create a new project. And if you want to do a supply chain analysis, so the analysis that I've just explained, you click on supply chain analysis. We also have some specific modules for scope 3 GHG emissions, but also to do a hotspot analysis for the German supply chain law. And the second thing that you need to do is you need to decide on which model you want to use. So there's different models, as I have explained, and we are always building on those models. So you see that WifOR has developed lots of models, and we are constantly updating those models. So I now take the newest release, which also includes the WifOR value factors. And then you search for the spend file that I've just shown you and can create a project, which means you upload the spend file into the tool. And before you see results, you first need to tell the tool which things you want to calculate. And as you remember, I also included the vendors into this Excel file. So I'm interested in what are the potential hotspots of my vendors. So I drag the vendors in here. I'm not at the moment not interested in the function and the product, but I could do this later if I would want to. And then I click on indirect effects, which is all the upstream parts, including the suppliers of the suppliers. The tool enables also to calculate induced effects, but I skipped that for the time being. And then I'm interested in calculating the impacts in tier 1, so the direct suppliers, and the total. But I might also be later interested in what's happening in tier 2 and tier 3. And then I'm interested in what is the GDP contribution, what is the jobs created in FTEs, and I'm also interested in the GHG emissions. And you see there's lots and lots and lots of other indicators that you might find here interesting. And I'm especially also interested in how many child labor is there and how many people are working below the living wage in the supply chain. And I'm only interested in the year 2025 for my first assessment. So that is only showing you the physical indicators, so GHG measures in kilograms and tons. But you might also look on what does this mean in impact in euros to the society. So here we have different selections. So you might look at what is the impact in monetary units using the WifOR value factors, but you might also look in what does this mean according to WifOR value factors. So you simply click here on WifOR value factors and then can choose the impacts that are included in the WifOR vector factors. For the time being, I keep on the WifOR value factors. And to give you a brief overview, I click on GDP contribution, total air pollution, because I want to have a quick sense of what is the most important indicators in my supply chain such that I can do deep dives maybe later on. So I click on child labor, fair wages, and negative gap. So what is the negative externalities from not paying fair wages in the supply chain? Click on forced labor. And usually large indicators are also injuries and diseases. And I'm also interested in where those impacts are occurring. So I click on by country. And now you see already from this small purchase list, we are already creating 81,000 data points. And if I would now be interested in doing more indicators or simply want to know in which sectors the impacts occur, this would already lead to more than 5 million data points, that is too much for the calculation right now, because it would take a little bit longer, and I start a calculation for looking at what is the impact of those indicators that I clicked by country. And this, depending on the size of the purchase list, might take a while. I clicked in the way that it only takes about 30 seconds at the moment. So if you use the tool, be a little bit careful on what you're clicking, and rather do a first rough assessment at the very beginning and then start deep diving later on when you use the tool. And now what we already have is a quite comprehensive idea of what is the largest impact drivers. So we see the GDP contribution, and we see that fair wages is the by far largest negative indicator, followed by greenhouse gas emissions, water consumption, and air pollutions. On the left-hand side, you see how many child labors in numbers are estimated in the supply chain, and also the GHG emissions in kilograms and the jobs created. And now you can download the data points, and they come in a quite comprehensive format. It takes a while to open it, a second. I want to show you the Excel file and how it comes. So the results come in a quite comprehensive format that you can then upload in any other tool to create dashboards or whatsoever, or into any other systems. And the tool also has at least some visualizations. So you might look and, for example, creating a bar chart and look, okay, which vendors has the most impact in terms of air pollutions that I've just clicked here, and you directly see, okay, my vendor B has the highest risk of air pollution, and can also see it by tier. And you can also create a world map. I know that your Iris is showing the sunburst because she likes the most, so I don't show you the sunburst, but we can also look, okay, in which countries are the most air pollutions here. And by that, I stop here and hand over back to Vera.
Thank you so much, Richard. I will quickly share my slide again. So in between now the next part, handing over to Iris, we would like to ask all participants, so I've already seen there's been some questions in the chat room. What are your biggest challenges when it comes to measuring your supply chain impact? So I'll give everyone a couple of minutes to answer this question. Okay, I think the results are still tweaking, but we should be almost done. And it's really interesting to see. May I wait another minute before I proceed? All right, so it really does seem like the first option is the most common one. So the difficulty in obtaining necessary data from suppliers and other stakeholders. So this data retrieval challenge that we spoke about earlier seems to be a really common, challenge, as well as in second place, it seems the insufficient tools, technology, or skilled personnel to conduct proper assessments. So let's say the technical and literacy challenges when it comes to measuring your supply chain impact, followed also by challenges in analyzing, of course, the very vast panorama of sustainability metrics. And thank you so much to everyone who replied. And with that, as Richard anticipated, exactly, we can move over to our second panelist. So thank you so much, Iris, again for being here today. maybe as a starting question, I would like to ask you, why did you choose WISIT to calculate impact metrics such as, for example, scope 3 calculation or the German supply chain law metric LKSG?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So overall, it is about really gaining transparency into our supply chain, right? And we are using the tool basically in two ways. First of all, in order to validate what we are calculating outside of WISIT, so to establish kind of a quality gate to other calculations on impact data, but then also on the physical impacts. And then secondly, to do some calculations themselves in the tool. And here I might share two examples, two very concrete examples. Vera, you already mentioned the Lieferkettengesetz, the supply chain due diligence law. But I actually would like to start with an example of an environmental use case that is JT. So closely related to the example that Richard just provided. And on this slide, you can see what we just published very recently in SAP's integrated report. That is an overview of where in the value chain the emissions occur. And without going too much into detail, you can see that a quite significant part is upstream. And under upstream, we got different categories under the greenhouse gas protocol. And two of them are purchased goods and services and capital goods. And that's exactly where the methodology that Richard just explained comes into play. How that? Well, ideally, in a perfect world, we would have all the data from our suppliers, right? But our experience is very much in line with what also was just shared by the audience in the poll, that it is difficult to obtain the actual carbon footprint for the products that we purchase from our suppliers. Yes, the data availability and also the data quality on this is increasing, and we anticipate that this will improve over time. Nonetheless, I do think that we will most likely, at least not in the short term, be in a scenario where we would have all the data from all the suppliers available that we need in order to calculate the emissions with regards to the upstream part. And that's exactly where WISIT and the WifOR methodology, or impact measurement and evaluation methodology, is so powerful. And that's where this box on the secondary data is relevant, because for those cases where we don't have the direct data from our suppliers, the primary data, we have established exactly this methodology that Richard just explained. So we share or upload the spend report into the WISIT, and then based on the required information on what are we procuring, in which categories or industries, and from which vendor and vendor country, we can map this data to the valuation coefficients provided from WifOR or from the Value Balancing Alliance, and then we obtain the total emissions. And with that, we can follow kind of a complementary approach to the direct data or the primary data that we obtain from our suppliers. So that's the environmental use case. Maybe quick pause, yeah, Vera?
Yes. No, thank you so much, Eus. I think that's already really clear and great to see, let's say, how you've been applying these methodologies in your, if I can say, daily operations, or maybe you want to tell us in a bit more detail how this has been applied in SAP so far, and maybe which functions in WISIT were most useful and why to you in order to grapple these challenges.
Yeah, sure. So in order to share those insights, I would actually also jump into the WISIT real quick. The example I'm sharing now is in the context of the LKSG, so the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, so focusing rather on social indicators. I won't go into the details because Richard quite nicely already explained the functionalities here. Just for the sake of compliance, legal compliance, for instance, it's interesting for us to understand which vendors do put the biggest risk in our supply chain, basically. So including by this drag and drop functionality, the vendor here. And for the sake of this example, I would only focus on the direct suppliers, not the deeper supply chain, and the indirect effects. And then I can choose between the physical impact and the monetary impact. You remember this pathway that was shared initially? This is the physical impact really is the impact that is typically measured in those ESG metrics that I think majority of us is well familiar with. So for instance, cases of child labor, cubic meters of water consumption, tons of CO2 equivalents, right? And then the monetary units, that's the translation into monetary terms, so euros or US dollars. That's not relevant for the sake of this example. But what I would want to focus on is also the country. And then I would use the sample spend report that Richard just shared and would start the calculation. Actually, I could save the settings here, which I did, to really go back to those pre-configured settings quite quickly, and could then start the calculation. This shouldn't take too long.
Yeah, it's usually let's say, approximate on the higher end, but as you see, exactly, it's already there.
Yeah,
thank you.
Exactly. And as Richard rightly mentioned, I really like the sunburst visualization. Why? I'll show it to you in a sec. So under LKSG, I would want to focus on those supplier and potentially also industry country combinations where the risk of a human rights violation is the biggest. It's actually under LKSG requirement that we do not have to analyze the entire supply chain, but really focus on those parts of the supply chain where the risk is the biggest. So that's where this methodology and then also the tool comes in quite handy. So I could first try to analyze in which countries do we see the biggest risk for. I have selected the human rights indicator and indicator that is relevant also under LKSG, that is injury. And here quite quickly I see, based on this sample spend report, okay, the biggest issues seem to be in Germany and in France. Okay, then I would need to take a look at those countries from a procurement perspective. But then obviously I would be interested in, okay, to which vendors should I talk? Where would on average the risk be the highest? And I can then update the visualization and see that, okay, for France, vendor B really seems to, contribute quite significantly to the overall risk as vendor B in Germany. So these insights already help me to narrow down step by step the risk and to, in the end, ideally have a quite precise indication of in which industry, in which country, and for which vendor a specific human rights risk seems to be the highest. And this visualization already is quite powerful, I would say, and quite nicely to consume. But then I can also export the data to an Excel file that I did in case I want to, manipulate the data further. For instance, I can choose further forms of visualization. So under Pareto, for instance, I could analyze the data and see here quite quickly that according to 80-20, I should be focusing on vendor B, G, and potentially vendor F as a starting point. And that's actually how we use the data as one basis for us at SAP to also comply with legal requirements.
Thank you so much, Iris. That was really interesting and I think exhaustive when it comes to the content. So now let me just share the agenda again. Now, I would say thank you so much again, Iris, for your input. I think if there's any questions also in regards to what Iris just presented, and now we can go over to the Q&A session. And I see there has been already quite some questions in the chat and in the meeting chat. And thank you, Rita, for answering them so far. Maybe let's see if there are any questions that are still open. Or of course, if anyone wants to raise their hand or speak themselves, go ahead and do so. I think there is a question from Bernd Dinkel about how the vendor-specific risks are calculated. Yes, based on the manufacturing subsectors. So I think maybe, Richard, this is a question you can answer. Thank you.
Sure. So as explained, we do not have vendor-specific data points in the tool. We are working on integrating supplier-specific data. That's something that we're working on, but that's not yet integrated in the tool. So if you now look at specific vendor risks, the vendor risks are derived from the manufacturing sector, so the product code that we use, as well as the vendor address or the manufacturing sector where those things are produced. So for example, if you're buying products from BASF or from another chemical corporate, and you know this is chemicals and they are produced in Germany, you will get the risk for BASF from the chemicals, the chemical sector in Germany. But sometimes you have more products bought from one vendor, and that would then be the weighted risk of the products that you bought from this vendor. So at the moment now, it's not primary data from specific vendors, but it's based on the country and the manufacturing sector and the data behind those country sector combinations.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Bernd, also for this question. I hope, this answer is sufficient. And maybe in the meantime, while everyone else is still thinking, if there's any other questions coming up, we can proceed with a second poll question. However, I do see a raised hand from Gaia, so please. We cannot hear you, I think, Gaia.
Do you hear me now? I think my mic was disabled. Now it's able.
Yes.
So
yeah, you're great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I think it was great. First of all, I'm Gaia, also from Mitsubishi Chemical. For who doesn't know, we are also testing WISIT. I would like to I'm interested to know more about how to select the scenarios. So, because also you mentioned, Richard, beforehand, it's useful to start smaller and then get a bit more in details in the second instance. Otherwise, the data points are too much, and also the learning of the results, it's going to be complicated. So how to best set a scenario and based on the internal decision or internal request, select these parameters in a way that are useful to start once we have the data and everything ready, in a useful and practical way to start smoothly and small and then get bigger.
Let's directly take this, Vera. Cool. Thanks for this very, very, very good question. That very much depends on the use case for that you like to do this kind of analysis, because there's so many use cases of impact valuation. If you would, for example, like to do a materiality assessment and look at what is the largest impact drivers in the supply chain, I would, if I may share my screen, I would not drag any of those scenarios in here, because it simply would increase my data load. So I would start with not dragging anything in here. You could also drop the tier 1 and only look at the total impact, but then choose rather all those indicators. And you do not even need to choose by country, and you will get an overview on which indicators have the highest impacts. When you then want to know, okay, but I've realized now GHG emissions or the living wage gap or air emissions is my largest impact driver, and I'm interested in which vendors are responsible, then you should probably drag and drop the vendors and maybe also the manufacturing sector, so the product code that you have done there. And you should also have a look, okay, does those impacts occur directly at tier 1, so directly at supplier, or only on the rest? but you then might only choose a selected portion of indicators in here to get those results. And that's what I meant. Be a little bit careful. Think first before you click on those things, because I know that your purchase list might not only include 8 vendors, but might also include thousands of vendors, or your purchase list might also include thousands or 100,000 of product groups. And therefore, we have already built in a function that allows you to click on the first, say, top 10 vendors. So you might simply choose the top 10 vendors. That reduces heavily the amount of data points, but you still receive all the top 100 vendors. But it heavily reduces the amount of data that is produced, because and then you have a first look at the top 100 vendors or the top product groups. That also helps you to slice and dice your data points at the first look. I hope this answered your question.
Yes, thank you. So we'll start with all indicators monetized, right? That also was one of my questions. And with the total of the value chain instead of tier 1. Yeah, I will try this out. Thank you.
Cool. Very much looking forward to your feedback once you tried this out.
Yeah, same here. So thank you so much, Gaia, for the question, and thank you, Richard, for answering. I see there is another question in the meeting chat by Sylvia. Can business owners find positive impact vendors with this tool? I think this is a really interesting question, and I would suggest that maybe Iris, you can give your insight in the work you've done so far, but also Richard, of course, jump in whenever.
Sure. Actually, I was just typing the reply, but maybe like this it's even easier. So this really depends on the indicator. So for environmental indicators, typically the impact is negative, right? Because if we emit 1 ton of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere, that's just a negative impact. So typically business activities lead to negative impacts here. But there are some indicators where we can also find and see a positive impact. And example would be training hours provided. Companies that provide training to their employees, that's a positive impact. Or the economic contribution of companies, like jobs that are being created, or a contribution to the overall GDP of an economy, that would be a positive impact. So the short answer to your question, Sylvia, is really, it depends on the indicator.
Can I add one sentence on that? So once we have sectors, so whole economic sectors, and that definitely also depends on the granularity of the sectors. Once we have sectors that really have a positive also environmental contribution to the society, we will see those data, we will see that in the data points from the statistical authorities. From my knowledge, as I know our data points, there's at the moment no sector that has as a total a positive contribution by producing carbon sinks or something like that in the economy. But once the data shows that there's a positive contribution of one sector, that would be visible also in the data points. But otherwise, of course, as Iris mentioned, each sector has at least a positive economic contribution to the society, but also positive training, positive contribution by training hours.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Iris, for your answers. And I think there has been a question, yes, about the trial of WISIT. Positive answer about this as well. And I see that there is the question about sharing a list of the actual metrics that could be included in your model. So, Richard, I would hand this over to you as well.
Yeah, I will look for it's always depending on the model. So you always need to distinguish between the WISIT tool that enables you to calculate impact with a specific tool, The most prominent model that is implemented in the tool, but there's also others. So there's also Figaro and Exaobase implemented in the model. But the most prominent model is the WifOR model, and there we also have different models because we always update them. I try to provide you with a list of the actual metrics. That's definitely in WISIT, and you can definitely download it on the tool. So once you have access to the tool, and yes, we enable you to get a test access. You can go to user support and FAQs, and there on documents. And there for each and every model, we have a list of different handbooks and the documentations in here. And there you also find a list of indicators that is included in the respective model, and also an explanation on the data sources and the different satellites. In theory, nearly all indicators can be implemented that somehow can be traced to economic sectors. The question is always on whether we find data points for that, and we are constantly improving our data model. If you have a specific request, we would also be happy if you share those requests with us, and we might also start a project on developing a specific indicator for you.
Thank you, Richard. So I hope that answered the question. If there are other questions incoming, we still have a couple of minutes for them. So please feel free to join the meeting chat or raise your hand. So maybe in the meantime, just to close up on this, thank you so much for all the questions. I'd like to ask a quick closing question about the impact accounting journey, just to kind of assess as well the level of literacy and participation in this field in our participants today. Okay, so there have been some replies until now, and it does seem like definitely at least the majority of the participants today has already started, let's say, the journey. But of course, there's also room for improvement, and exactly. It's interesting to know that others have started exploring impact accounting but haven't implemented it yet. So yeah, I hope that the content of this masterclass also encourages you into trying this out and maybe gives you some new insights about the topic as well. And I think these are all the answers for now. So, okay, before we move on to the next steps, I would first like to, quickly give you some key takeaways that we have seen until now in this masterclass. So, first of all, we have seen how impact accounting can drive value and foster long-term sustainable decision-making in businesses. But we've also seen how input-output methodologies, as has been explained also now in the last questions, is really a sound scientific method that can help businesses to account for impacts in their supply chain. And finally, we have also heard some great insights about how, for example, in a company already, WISIT, the WifOR Impact Sustainability tool, has been supporting daily operations and use cases such as the Scope 3 calculation or the German supply chain law due diligence, LKSG. and how it has been applied there in the impact accounting journey. And on that note, I would first of all like to thank all of you for joining today's masterclass. I really thank you to all of the participants who have joined today and to your questions. And of course, a special thank you to our panelists today, to Richard and to Iris, for the insightful conversations and all your comments and presentations. And yeah, I think there is a last question coming from Katrin, maybe, or maybe that was a mistake. Okay, so thank you so much again. And thank you everyone for joining. A couple of comments about the next steps. So as you've been mentioning already in the chat of the meeting, we will be sending out an email with the recording of this masterclass, and everyone who joined today's masterclass will be, they will be able to have the access to the WifOR Impact Sustainability tool for a week, and they will be able to schedule a call with our experts within the next 2 weeks to receive a free demo of the tool. And Katrin, please. Okay, I think maybe.
Okay, apologies. Sorry, I had to unmute myself first. I just wanted to pick up on one question that I saw posted here in the chat that I really liked. And the question was, how far along should users be in their impact accounting journey to use WISIT? I think that might be worthwhile discussing that briefly. Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. I think, Richard, you can take this on, please.
I can, but maybe also Iris can jump in then because that answer might be a little bit better answered by the users. I think you can start right away, but be prepared that, of course, if you're not aware to the data points, if you're not know already now what a value factor is, that it then makes a little that you might take a little more time to get convenient with the data points because you need to understand the details behind assets that you can then use the data points. But maybe Iris, you can add on this.
Yeah, actually, I would answer this question in line with what you just said, Richard. I think the threshold is quite low in a sense that you need just a spend report, right? That is manipulated in such a way that you can upload the data points to the tool. And then it's really about making use of the data that the tool provides. So interpreting the impact, the monetized impact, the physical impact. But here I would say there are also a lot of tutorials available from WifOR, and then also the underlying methodology from the Value Balancing Alliance. The documentations there, they are quite comprehensive, so that should help as well. So summarizing it, I would say you can start quite early on in your sustainability journey. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Iris, and thank you, Richard. I hope that answered the question. And yeah, again, I thank you all. We still have a couple of minutes for questions if anyone wants to ask anything else. So we still have some time. And yeah, I think.
Maybe just an addition from my side to this answer. From my perspective, I was trying also to train other users in the company that don't have any background on impact accounting, but because there is also the option to use the quantitative output, so not just a monetary one. I think this, as a first trial, let's say, for who is not familiar with impact accounting, it's useful to explain the tool itself. And the next step could be then the monetization and yeah, all the benefits that we know are connected with it.
Thank you so much, Gaia. Yes, I also think that is a great insight and, you know, a comment for anyone who wishes to start their impact accounting journey. So I think it's also a process of trial and error, especially when you work with an app. You need to get to know the app as well. at first. And yeah, we can just encourage you to really try it out and play around with the data that hopefully also is easily available to you. And yes, that's the only comment I wanted to make. So thank you so much again, everyone, for joining today. Thank you to the participants and to our panelists. And as I mentioned before, you will receive the recording of this session and also the free access to WISIT, as well as the possibility to schedule a meeting with our experts to gain more insights and get a user test of the tool. Thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.